Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my show Camera Tuesday. In today's episode we're gonna take a look at why you should not buy a cheap camera, specifically cheap DSLR. So let's dive right into it. Now you have to understand every experience human beings have, it's directly in a contrast, like as in you had good food compared to what, you had bad food compared to what, your experience of this camera was good or bad compared to what. So what do we inherently know nowadays? Now first you have to understand we are very familiar with our smartphone imaging technology has made leaps and bounds of progress that cannot be quantified. Basically we went from 1 megapixel, 1.2 megapixel, 3.2 megapixel to 48 megapixel, and this all happened in like around 5-ish years. So surprisingly high quality images are being starting to come out from our smartphone. So from smartphone points of view, it's very compact. That's the first thing you know about smartphone. It's compact. Then it also does what we call photo polish. Basically smartphone never gives you the photo that it's capturing, it polishes it, especially in Oppo, Mi phones and things of that nature. They take the photo, they smooth it out, they blur the background. Due to that, the images that are coming out feels higher quality than it actually is. Because here's the, if you have a full frame DSLR or a full frame mirrorless camera, to get actual background blur you have to have around more or less f2.8 lens or f1.4 lens. Those lenses are ludicrously expensive, as in $3,000 to $8,000 expensive. Most people are not gonna afford that. Very few people can afford that. So but somehow your smartphone can give you the background blur, the bokeh that literally looks like that. So you can't compete against that. Due to that photo polishing aspect, we suffer this consequence where we, like, even your smartphone that is barely, let's say, $300 or $400 nowadays specifically, you will feel like your images that are coming out specifically with portraits, they're so good that, like, to compete against that you need like around $5,000 to $6,000 camera to compete against that, due to that photo polish. And artificial intelligence has made it really good. Now again, let's remove that. Let's say you are like taking something mundane, you are not going into, like, portrait photography, you're doing something mundane. The first thing you will realize, it's very easy to use. So your smartphone is very easy to use. You open your camera app and you're like, okay, I understand what I have to do. You tap where you want to focus and boom, done. Simple, elegant. Now on top of that, it is very easy to basically share and store. You want to share it on Instagram, you want to share it on WhatsApp, you want to share it on Facebook, whatever. It's very easy to do right there on the spot, and it's also very easy to store. You have to understand, camera itself does not have a memory, so storage of the basically photos that you are taking has to be done externally, as in either in your computer or your backup cloud or things of that nature. So this is what we know. Due to this nature, basically we have to understand that we don't like cheap cameras nowadays, basically because our smartphone is becoming so good. Now what are the actual problem with basically cheap camera? Now think of it this way. I came from a generation where I had this point and shoot camera. So from point and shoot point of view, basically the DSLR was like, very large step up. But if you are coming from a good basically mid-range smartphone, the jump from your mid-range smartphone to your DSLR won't be that much. First of all, specifically in cheap DSLR, the image sensor is very old, ancient, as in the signal to noise ratio is not very good. So they're not going to give you very crisp or clean images because the sensor is ancient. Now because sensors that are used in your basically mobile phone, they are getting update every year, software update, hardware revision, things after things. Because you have to understand, just few years just in 2018 is the first time we had a APS-C sensor that had backside illumination, as in the wiring was on the behind, so it did not obstructed the photon path. So that is a recent thing. Here's the deal, when it was happening in mobile phone, it happened in few months. So mobile phone came around, one manufacturer figured out BSI, another manufacturer figured out basically dual pixel autofocus. If you want to figure out why basically Google Pixel photos are so good, because it's dual pixel autofocus. So understand that, like, the amount of progress that's happening in mobile industry is so dramatic that the cheaper end cameras, specifically like Canon 3000D or 4000D, those cameras are plastic body, and once you buy that, you're like, okay, I have something. It will feel cheap, and hope God help you if you have ever held a proper camera like 80D or Canon 5D Mark II. This feels like a plastic toy. Same goes for Nikon D3500. Like these sort of camera, they are very good to like you entice you. Oh, you are having a DSLR. Now first you hold it, it's like, okay, this does not feel as good as I thought, because it's very cheap. There have been serious corner cutting into all of these. They are cheap for a reason. They are not cheap like, oh, because technology has progressed. They are cheap because they are cheap. So that created a very serious paradox. You can have these, but you will not enjoy this, and you will hate this over time. Now you have to understand, because you are spending so much money, equivalent of a high-end smartphone, you must get great image quality out of it. Otherwise, it's not worth it. Because nowadays, specifically with skin tone smoothing, better image processing, the smartphone image quality is mind-bogglingly awesome. So this must exceed that. Now the biggest problem on these cheap cameras, even though sensor may be good, even though the processor may be good, is they cheap out on what we call autofocus. The autofocus on these puppies are nowhere near good. Basically, you can't like buy this, take a camera out and start taking photos. Most of your shots will be autofocus, even in a DSLR, and this would be like a very steep learning curve for you to how to make sure you get everything in focus. Now if you're coming from point and shoot, you can easily handle that, because you are expected to like, okay, I have to make my camera follow my command, rather than like in mobile phone, tap, done, tap, done. So first thing that will hurt you is the fact that generally all of these cameras have very bad autofocus, and the first time you have to like see through the viewfinder, then you will realize the biggest disadvantage of cheap cameras is that there is no feedback. You do not know what you are capturing. Basically, you're seeing what your camera is seeing, but you do not see what your image is gonna capture. Basically, you're not gonna get a feedback of aperture. Basically, f-stop is been generally wide open, so you do not know whether you have enough light or not. On top of that, you do not know whether your ISO is going to overexpose or underexpose. There is a tiny arrow that is on bottom that shows something like this. It's not intuitive, and given coming from a mobile phone, you get absolute feedback. This will be completely jarring. Oh, you will see I'm seeing through the camera lens, it's awesome. You check the photo is overexposed, especially in manual modes. Why? You have no feedback, so you cannot adjust this. Now we are not born with the understanding, okay, like your f-stop should be this much, then your ISO should be this much, then it's daylight, this should be this much. You learn these sort of thing. Now people who come from old film days, they can handle this, because from their point of view it became easier. But people, young generation who's coming from smartphone, that will like, what the hell is this? Why the heck I have points where I have to put someone's face? Like that's the first thing you will be shocked about. Like people take a DSLR, okay, hey, what are those points? Oh, I have to have someone's face on that basically point to get perfect autofocus. What is that? Like, understand this. You are coming from a world where face detection is there, and now you are pointed detection. Like you have to be on that point. So that feedback loop is very problematic for new beginners. Basically, if you are coming from a DSLR, if you are coming from a point shoot, if you are coming from a film photography, you will like easily handle those things. But anybody who's coming into photography now, coming from a basically mobile phone, they will be like, yeah, this is not as intuitive as you thought. On top of that, they're very hard to use. Even with all this, like the firmware running on these puppies are ancient. Like your camera phone software in the early days, they were also very limited. However, nowadays it's very refined, fine-tuned. Even in full manual mode, you can control every aspect very easily. Many of them don't have touch screen. Some those who have touch screen, we have very cheap quality touch screen. So those sort of scenario created a very difficult to use experience. So like you're gonna pull out your camera, it's like, okay, what is the setting, what is the knob, what is the ISO, what is the aperture, and then it will end up in a scenario where you just have to make it auto mode and you're gonna take a photo. Now problem with auto mode is that the processors on these puppies are not advanced enough. They cannot do metering properly, and you can easily see that compared to a very cheap camera versus a very expensive camera. Metering is like all over the place. So the hard to use problem becomes a headache, and the fact they don't have USB charging. For some reason, at this point in time, we don't have USB charging in all those DSLRs. Now, it's not that these DSLRs are old DSLRs, so I'm complaining something that has been like, from 2010. This camera came out in 2019. It should have had USB charging. It does not. For this big size, that puny battery that it has, like for some reason you can't USB charge it. Like we can USB charge laptops nowadays, as like USB-C is rated for 100 watts of power transmission. So for some reason you can't USB charge. That will be the first thing that will annoy you. You have to go like, okay, open the battery bank, then take out the battery, put it in a cradle, and then charge it. That's frustrating. And it's not that it will hurt you or you can't do this. It's just, it's gonna be a thing that will make your DSLR or whatever you have into a paperweight. I cannot tell you how many friends I physically know that like, oh, they have a good DSLR, here's the deal. What happens with that? It becomes a paperweight. It becomes something that is just in their almirah, basically like a cupboard. Why? Because it's hard to use. And because you are contrasting it with your smartphone that is on your pocket, it must be easy to use. So that hard to use. And not only in terms of that, it does not have USB charging. Many software menus on this will like make you scratch your head. It's like, what? Why? And on top of that, there is no apps in ecosystem on this puppy. That creates a problem, especially if you are like, you know, oh, I want to experience with RAW. I was recently photographing Milky Way photography, so I had to do what we call expose to the right. Basically we overexpose it, then we reduce the exposure, and then we get the Milky Way detail. Now here's the deal, I could not do that on camera, so I had to take the memory card load, put it in a laptop, see the whether I'm getting the exposure that I want to know, then put the memory card in, then take the photo again. So you can understand that the fact you can't even process the raw file that is in the camera itself creates a paradox. Basically, you don't know what you're getting. You can't push it, like you can't tune things properly. You don't know whether your white balance can be managed from, because sometimes raw file can have very good white balance range, sometimes they don't. So you can't process that, you can't experience that. You have to have either have a laptop or Wi-Fi transmission, or you have to have a smartphone that has Adobe Lightroom portable. So understand this is the problem with cheap camera. You are getting a camera that is costing more or less like a high-end smartphone. The image quality is not that good. The only thing you are getting is like big bulky lenses, and the body itself is very outdated. The autofocus is very lame. There is no feedback loop. The battery cradle will annoy you. All those things will make your DSLR purchase into a paperweight. So please stay away from these things, especially these super low end ones. You're gonna regret buying them. Like you buy it and you're like, either you have to buy quickly a good camera, or you will be like, okay, this is just, I thought I wanted to do photography or something like that, but it's not that. Trust me. And these things are heavy. To get a context how heavy they are, try taking a water bottle that is upwards of 2 liters and then try to holding it like this. Do it for half an hour. That's how painful these things are. Now then we come to understand, okay, but I still want to do photography. Now first you have to understand what you truly want to do. Now if you are one of those guys who's like, you know, I want to do a bit of this, I want to do a bit of that, I want a bit of that. Yeah, you don't know what you want to do. In those sort of scenario, if you are in that kind of scenario, like, hey, I want to do a little bit of everything, please start out with a camera that has long range possibilities. Basically it can do everything. Buy something what we call as jack of all trade. Don't buy something like, you know, master. So you should seriously, if you are in that kind of scenario where this is your first camera, I would seriously urge you to look into hybrid cameras, because nowadays, even though point and shoot is almost dead, hybrid camera has come and replaced this. So in the same size, same form factor, I can get a camera like this, has a sensor more or less the same size of a smartphone, but Sony has revolutionized that by creating Sony RX100. However, Sony RX100 is ludicrously expensive. So Panasonic comes around and Panasonic released ZS100, and this is this puppy. Like it's more or less the same size. It's not dramatically big. However, it's complete manual, complete RAW support, very good autofocus, 10x optical range. That will be the biggest benefit of this, because it can fit in your pocket. We've provided your jacket pocket, and you can pull it out, focus, do it. And it's also very bright in terms of aperture. It's f2.8. So not only you are getting a lens that has very long range, not only you're getting something that has a big sensor that can tangibly defy your smartphone photography. This is amazing. Like this is something that you can truly carry everywhere, USB charging included. So all those things combined, these sort of camera nowadays are very good, because you can pull it out, take a photo, put it back in, done. Like advanced functions, features that makes your life easy, comfortable, including very good image stabilization, which in this scenario has lens image stabilization plus sensor image stabilization. So it's pretty amazing. So in this sort of scenario, this will be a very good starting off point, because if you buy a DSLR, you can't go to another system. Let's say you bought a Canon DSLR, you can't go to Nikon. You bought Nikon, you can't go to another. Like unless you are rich enough where you can just dispose of that kind of money, but you can't change the system. Once you are into the system, you are locked into it. However, these sort of hybrid camera, they are very good teaching tool. Like they give you complete manual focus, complete everything. So you can learn photography. Then you'll be like, okay, I think I take a lot of animal wildlife photography, but I do generally that during a day, during brightly lit. So you can buy let's say a camera that does good autofocus plus has a good lens range. So hybrid cameras are very good as of now, and they are practically cheap. Now if you want an interchangeable lens camera, at this point, if you're not sure what you exactly want to do, and you don't want to spend like $2,000 on a camera body itself, I would urge you to look into Sony a6400. This is the latest sole reason why I'm asking anybody to look into this is simply the autofocus on this is mind-bogglingly good. Like, there are certain camera that can compete against, and most of them are Sony from itself, and others are from more expensive Canon and more expensive Fuji. So at this point, at this price, this has amazingly good autofocus, which is the first thing. Like, once you miss focus, yeah, your camera is becoming very close to becoming a paperweight. So you have to understand, a6400 just for autofocus. Now then people compare, it does not have IBIS. Okay, no problem. Buy this lens, basically f24, I'm saying f24, basically 24mm to 240mm. Now this is a big heavy lens. This is a small light board camera. So this will give you an idea how in the future when you're gonna buy big bulky lenses, because if you want quality you have to have big bulky lenses. That's why we keep building bigger and bigger telescope. In physics there is no cheating in that. You want bigger and bigger. So this lens is a very good all-rounder lens. This is not the most amazing lens. This is not the greatest lens. This is something you put on your camera and that's it. You buy this lens, this gives you 10x range, so you can zoom in, you can take photos, you can widen out. Now after using this, you can go into Lightroom and just see, hey, most of my photos are, let's say, below 50mm. Now you know, next time you buy a camera, basically next lens, you make sure it's below 50mm. So you get, let's say, 18 to 50mm. So that time you can buy f2.8 lens, because you need to know how you what you do. You can't be like, oh, I want to do bit of this, bit of that, bit of that. Yeah, you don't know what you want to do. Like, it takes time to know that. You have to learn. So this sort of 10x optical range with mind-bogglingly good autofocus makes this a very awesome pair. Now if you don't want to do buy into like super expensive, because this is an expensive combination, go with this. This is quite cheap right now, as of now. And there are you can also look into Sony RX100, which is industry leading, and there are some other variation of other variation. There are certain cameras, but those are more expensive, so I can't truly recommend them. So this is the, as of now, best all-rounder kit. Like, you buy this and you will like, okay, this is a camera that I can use. This is a camera that I can just go around on trips with. This setup, you can go on a trip with having one basically lens, instead of having a suitcase filled with lenses where you have, oh, my wide angles, my telephoto, my this, my that. Yeah, so all things combined, first thing, please figure out what you want to do. Now if you don't know that, if you are like, okay, I want to do bit of bird, I want to do bit of low light, bit of this, bit of that, if you have those sort of mindset, please buy something that has very good range. The equipment must be like jack of all trade. So these two good combination. Then Panasonic is also a very good combination for that sort of scenario. Once you have this, then you can easily know, okay, I always focus on zoomed in photography. So next time you buy telephoto lens, because now you know like, okay, my core focus is on telephoto end. So this is what you should buy. So this was my presentation on why you should not buy cheap cameras. I hope you liked it or learned from it. In that case, please click the ad shown in this video. That will directly help me. And you can also like it. Now, if you didn't like it, don't worry. You can press dislike twice to show me your extra disappointment. And you can leave a comment because I reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free. And as always, thanks for watching.